This is the Microsoft Cloud Show, episode 10, where we're going to go over the latest news in the cloud from Microsoft with Windows Azure, Amazon with AWS, and Google with Google Compute. Welcome to the Microsoft Cloud Show, the only place to stay up to date on everything going on in the Microsoft Cloud world, including Windows Azure, Office 365, Exchange, Lync, and other related technologies. Just the information, no marketing, no BS. I'm Andrew Connell.
And I'm Chris Johnson.
And we're just two dudes telling you how we see it. Here we are with episode 10. So today we're going to go over the latest news from Amazon, Microsoft, and Google on the cloud. So first, what have you been up to, CJ?
Well, it's been kind of a big week. There's been a bunch of stuff going on. We saw the launch of the Xbox One, which I'm a proud owner of and have been wasting plenty of time on, which I hope I get over shortly because, it can be a complete time sink that's not exactly productive time, right? So, I'm enjoying getting that out of my system at the moment. And then also starting to see a little bit of news around the SharePoint conference coming up in March next year. We have a few people say that they're going to be speaking at that, so hopefully anytime now we're going to see a whole list of sessions and things come out for that. So that'll be sort of interesting from a cloud perspective because obviously we're all looking to see where what Microsoft's direction is with SharePoint and Office 365 and things like that for the next year. And I think that conference will really paint the picture. So looking forward to seeing what's coming out with that.
Definitely agree. I'm looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, how about you?
Oh, well, you mentioned the Xbox One. I'm not one of the proud owners of Xbox One. I am hunting for an Xbox One at the moment. I think hunting is the best way to explain it because I've got a stack of Best Buy gift cards that I need to use, that I want to use, but they're burning a hole in my pocket, so I need to use them. And trying to find an Xbox One at Best Buy, which all of them are sold out around me, so it's driving me crazy. And people like you who are posting videos of your gameplay, or as right now on Skype, you're holding up your Xbox One controller. Oh gosh, you're killing me. And but of course my eyes are getting way too big because I've now looking at spending way too much on Xbox. I've got the console, got to get another controller. I'm a racing guy. We're both racing guys. So I've got to get my hands on Forza. And then, of course,
Forza is good.
Oh, and then, of course, I found, have you seen this Thrustmaster wheel?
Whenever you say Thrustmaster, I know exactly what you're talking about. Those guys make some pretty cool attachments for driving and flying and all that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah, they've got, of course, my dream car is a Ferrari 458 Italia, and they have a wheel that is coming out. That is going to be that works with Xbox One. It also works with the PC, but it's also got pedals. It's got the authentic Ferrari pedals.
Nice.
Oh my God! It's the only downside to it, $4 bills.
Ouch.
Yeah. Well, so I'm sitting here now and I'm looking at basically an Xbox One is essentially about an $1,100 Forza 5 console for me right now.
You might as well just attach another room to your house and call it your sim room or something. Right?
Shh, my wife might hear this.
Classic. Hey, so this is vaguely related to the cloud. It's a bit of a stretch, but I'll have a crack at it. So Xbox One, I've been playing Call of Duty Ghosts, and whenever I seem to log in, it says fetching your profile from the cloud, and it so it does a whole bunch of storage stuff up in the cloud, and it also in Forza will use some cloud compute and cloud storage for doing things like calculating your driving habits, so that when your friends are online but you're not, they can still race you. And it sort of uses the cloud somehow. I really don't know what happens behind the scenes, but it stores your driving habits and how you drive and how you've raced. To build a profile for what they call a drivatar, which is like a a bot, except it has your driving habits and styles.
Oh, wow. That's really slick.
And apparently they're offloading a whole bunch of compute stuff to Azure as well in the background for some games.
Yeah, I saw something where they have like three VMs are allocated to each console that's online at a time or something like that.
Wow. I heard the next Halo game is going to have a very heavy reliance on cloud computing in the background to offload non-real-time computational stuff that can happen in the background. Yeah.
I can just see getting so confused if we could walk back, do a Wayback Machine, jump back and talk to the people who were doing games and they were all pumped up about all these new shaders and everything. Like, oh yeah, you can do this really cool cloud. And it's like, we have this thing called fog that we're using in our games right now. Like, no, totally different.
We're different clouds.
Yeah. So I'm in the hunt right now for an Xbox. I have to find it. Probably gonna ultimately find one, and then it's got to sit hidden away because it might be a family present under the tree on December the 25th. So we'll see. But I guess other stuff, I've been wrapped up a conference in the last few weeks at the SP Live conference down in Orlando. It's a really good show. It's turning into being a really good show with a really good dedicated following. So I'm really excited to be involved in that. Looking forward to the ones that we'll have in 2014. And then also, I had set up the, a kind of a pod show update. You and I have been looking at the logs of the downloads for the pod show.
Yeah, how are things going?
I tell you what, so I made a big mistake in that I did not turn on logging for hits on the on our blob storage. So the podcast, the website is hosted as an Azure website. All the files and stuff are associated with this site, including the episodes, are all stored in an Azure blob. And I made the big mistake of forgetting to turn on the logging when we went live with the podcast in early October of 2013. So finally remembered to flip the switch on October the 25th or 26th. And yesterday, or just recently, I guess, I found a little bit of code and wrote a little console app that actually pulled everything, all the log information for all the downloads. And I got to say, I am really surprised, pleasantly surprised at our metrics. So from late October and all the way through November, so just over a month, we were looking at over 7,700 downloads of just the episodes from the show.
That's tons.
7,700 for the first 2 months, and all we have is 9 shows.
Yeah, I'm impressed. That's really good. I'm not blowing our own trumpet or anything, but it's a great start.
I was pretty surprised, but I was pretty impressed. So for everybody that's subscribing to it, first, thank you very, very much. Really appreciate it. Really like the feedback that we're getting. Love to have the little conversations on Twitter too with everybody. So only people writing for the Twitter account, that's myself and CJ. So I really do appreciate it. We'd love to see some people get some reviews and everything, and the different places where you can get the podcast, both on iTunes and in the Microsoft Store as well. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, we'd love some more. We'd love some more reviews and so forth. So jump into iTunes and give us your feedback and rate us. It'd be much appreciated.
Absolutely. In this episode, we wanted to focus on talking about some of the latest news and notes in the cloud. So while the podcast is called the Microsoft Cloud Show, we did say at the beginning we want to make sure that we focus on all of the cloud because we want to look at the competitive landscape. And there's a lot of news that came out recently around really the I'd say there's 4 really big players in my mind for cloud, and that's Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and Rackspace. At least that's the way I kind of look at it. And the big one, I guess, the big one that everyone kind of looks to is that everyone sees as the leader in this space is Amazon. It's nice to see Microsoft with Windows Azure as seen as an up and comer. I think it's a very compelling story. I'm very happy with Windows Azure and like to see all the inroads they're making there. But it always helps to get a competitive landscape on the different features, because kind of like when the search wars were going on at the height of the search wars between Google and Bing and Yahoo, it's really neat to see one company come out with new features and to see everybody else respond. So
yeah, that is definitely, it happens a lot. You see it happening, right? Where Amazon got the leap on Azure by probably a couple of years, I would say. And now Azure is scrapping its way up the stack and making really good inroads and winning a lot of deals with enterprises because they're so good at selling into the enterprise.
Yep.
And so they're making a really good comeback. And it's not only on features, but you also see them like price matching with each other. And that's really driving the costs down too. So that's awesome for people that use these things.
Yeah, it really. I think that this is the day, or this is the battlefield that we're going to really see. We've seen it really heat up, I think, in 2013, and I think this is really where we're going to see like the tech battlefield go on for 2014 is around the cloud space.
Yeah, who knew a book company would turn out to be, run a good percentage of the internet?
Oh my goodness, no kidding. I mean, there was an interview with Jeff Bezos for Amazon. That aired on 60 Minutes the day before Black Friday. And, I find it really ironic that everyone is picking up on this Amazon Prime Air that is, years away about using octocopters to drop in up to a 5-pound shipment. But if you sit down and you watch that interview, I mean, that it just shows like how brilliant, how great of a company Amazon is and how forward thinking they are. I mean, I probably paused it and rewound that story, that interview multiple times. So I'll make sure to put a link to that interview that you can watch on the 60 Minute site. But highly recommend it.
He gets my vote because he went, not as part of Amazon, but he gets my vote because he went and dredged up some old Apollo 11 engines off the bottom of the ocean floor, which, given my space bent, or our space bent, I should say, like, full credit to that man because I can't wait to go see those in a museum somewhere.
No doubt. Yeah. Well, he pulled up 2. He gave one to NASA. I guess he gave both of them to NASA because they're still technically NASA property. But he said for the second one, he's like, we would like to have it in the Seattle Air and Space Museum. So,
booyah, yeah. Close by to me.
Yep.
Yeah, from the Saturn V, right? So that'll be amazing to see.
Yeah.
Anyway, so back to Amazon.
Okay, so a couple weeks ago, Amazon had their AWS conference called Invent, and it's in Las Vegas. It's their big cloud conference that they did, and so they announced a boatload of stuff. And I want to just kind of go through some of these new things that they were talking about, which are pretty cool. So I'll go through them kind of quick, and then we'll have a bunch of links in the show notes to where you can find both the blog announcement of the feature, and then as well as you can go look at the service offering on the Amazon site. So these are in really no particular order. I'm going to go through them fairly quickly because we could talk about these forever. But curious to hear if anybody wants to dive into more of this stuff. Just leave us some feedback, and we'll love to dig in more and maybe have some deeper conversations about them. So first, they have one thing called Amazon Workspaces. Now, the idea behind Workspaces, and this is something I've seen the Microsoft guys talk about at previous conferences with Azure, but the idea is to essentially have dumb terminals in an office that launch remote desktops that are hosted in the cloud. That's really what Workspace is. So what they say on their site, it allows customers to easily provision cloud-based desktops that allow end users to access documents, applications, and resources they need with a device of their choice, including laptops, iPads, Kindle Fires, Android tablets, Surfaces, all that kind of stuff. So that's really cool because, I mean, we've seen like complicated software packages you have to install and set up on people's machines. This way, you set it up once, replicate that VM or replicate that workspace for a new employee, and poof, you're up and running.
I mean, loads of companies, internally run, or big companies for the most part, run sort of VDI or virtual desktop type infrastructure, with servers on-prem or in a data center, and then do this with their employees for their desktops. And so Amazon are basically coming in and going, cool, get rid of all of that, or put that server infrastructure up in our cloud and manage it like all of your other stuff.
Yep.
But you can still do your VDI stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, they did. And so that's one thing that they had. Another thing that they announced is something called AppStream. The idea behind this is actually very, very similar to what we were just talking about in the intro to the podcast, where Microsoft is using VMs to kind of augment the Xbox One stuff. The idea behind AppStream is it allows for you to have a flexible and low latency service that's going to allow you to stream very resource intensive applications down to different clients, from mobile clients to desktop clients, tablets, which could be really useful for really heavy compute things that need to be done, for games or whatever. But you can stream the data straight to the different devices instead of it being, really kind of an offline kind of a thing. So that's a new thing they have called AppStream.
Interesting.
They have another thing they announced called CloudTrail. And this one's really cool. I'd love to see this. If we don't already have this in Azure, I'd love to see this added to Azure. But what this guy does is it allows you to basically track every single AWS API call from your account as a log entry, so that you can go back and you can find out what calls you're making against your Amazon AWS instances, find out who's doing it, and provide some sort of a chargeback model. So,
right. Yeah, that's I like it just from an audit perspective, right? Mm-hmm. The ability to look back and see what is doing things in your environment and being able to track down problems and things like that. So that's fascinating.
Yeah.
That would be cool to have Azure do as well.
Yep, definitely. I'd love to see that in Azure. Okay, so let me...
Even more than just the API, but even, somebody taking an operation in the console, like in the web console, and having an audit trail of everything that was done. You could at least see, when it was done, what they did, and who did it would be really handy.
Yeah, and being able to have like role-based things that people are allowed to do instead of having to have, administrative access to everything. So
yeah. Definitely.
So a couple other things they added. I want to get into one in just a minute here, but let me do two really quick. So one is something called Kinesis. And the way they describe this is it's a fully managed service for real-time processing of streaming data at a massive scale. It can collect and process hundreds of terabytes of data per hour from hundreds of thousands of sources, allowing us to very easily write applications that process information in real time from sources such as website clickstreams, marketing, financial information, manufacturing, social media, blah, 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 blah. So with this is going to allow customers to build very cool and robust real-time dashboards and be able to capture exceptions and alerts and surface those things, drive recommendations. You can see that Kinesis, if that's not something that Amazon's probably not using for their own, storefront, that's built. You could tell that's something that they built for themselves, and now they're selling it for other people to use as well. So, another thing we got is something called Redshift. It's a fast and fully managed petabyte scale data warehouse service that's going to allow you to have very cost effective data warehouses to effectively analyze all of your data. This is also combined with some other stuff that they did, which is going to allow you to very easily have a backup of this data warehouse across to a second AWS region. So in case things go down, your data warehouse is always up and running. It's something that is a continuous thing going on. So you don't have access to the second one until the first one goes down, and then it kind of does a hot swap over to the second one.
I see.
So, but it's cool for very big data warehouses and stuff, to letting them manage that.
Nice.
Then Amazon also went through and added a bunch of new EC2 instances. And for those of you who aren't familiar, EC2 is Amazon's equivalent of like Azure virtual machines. So what they did is they added in a new segment of what they call their C instances. They call these the C3 instances. And these are much more robust VMs. So they went from a large to an extra large to a double X to a quad X to an 8 times X. And they range anywhere from 2 CPUs with 3.5 gigs of RAM and a pair of 16 gig SSDs, all the way up to 32 CPUs, 60 gigs of RAM, and a pair of 320 gig SSDs.
So what's interesting with this that I've noticed is that they've sort of, for the C3 large, extra large, and 2XL, I think, they're kind of matching Azure's virtual machine sizes, I've noticed. Mm-hmm. So like the C3 large is the equivalent, sort of the equivalent of a medium-sized virtual machine in Azure with, 2 procs and about 3.5 gig of RAM ish. And in Azure, it's 18 cents an hour, whereas Amazon now is 15 cents an hour.
That won't last long.
No, exactly, yeah. So now the C3 Extra Large is a 4 CPU machine with 7 gig of RAM, and that matches to the large in Azure, which is a 4 proc 7 gig machine. It's 36 cents an hour in Azure retail, but 30 cents an hour in Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
And then same with the Extra Large, an 8 proc box with 14 versus 15 gig of RAM. 72 cents in Azure, 60 cents in Amazon. So there's a little bit of a price war going on by the looks of it. These SKUs look like they've been added to directly compete with the Azure VM sizes.
I agree. I noticed the same thing. I mean, and it's funny when you explain it, when I explain these, what Amazon's doing, what Microsoft is doing with these really large VMs, people are like, why in the world would I ever want a VM that's that big? And it's like, think about it as I actually was working on a project recently with someone, and they had a ton of data they needed to process. And what they ended up doing was just firing up a very, very large VM that had SQL installed on it. They used to go through and import a tremendous amount of data, 153 million. This is actually done. This was done taking the data that the hackers exposed from the Adobe compromise for all the passwords. They uploaded just short of 153 million accounts, and then did some analysis on passwords and password hints and what people were using. And then he threw the VM away. And
Password.
Yeah, exactly. My password hint is password. My password is actually a lowercase password. I'll throw a 1 on the end of it so nobody really will pay attention to that.
Oh, it's frightening how scary and real that really is. Anyway.
Yeah. They did also announce another new kind of a VM. Amazon did. They call this their G2 instance. Now this is cool. So what this is all designed around like 3D applications. And so the idea is that you've got a really hardcore VM that you can use for doing a lot of like visual stuff. So it's going to allow you to run cloud, and it's going to allow you to run in the cloud and have high performance 3D graphics that you're going to be able to stream to things like mobile devices, TVs, or desktops. So the code for this is the G2.2x large. And here's the specs on this. Now get this. Tell me this isn't a killer machine. It's got an NVIDIA Grid CPU with 1,536 CUDA cores and 4 gigs of video RAM that's all frame buffered. It's got the Intel Sandy Bridge 2.6 gigahertz CPU with Turbo Boost, and not just one, it has 8 of those. It's got 15 gigs of RAM and a 60 gig SSD. Now, these SSDs you guys are probably looking at and saying, well, these SSDs are tiny. But that you don't need to worry about that, because you're always going to pair these things with like extra external storage, like an S3 storage or something like that. These are just what's going on the VM. So you're really only using that for
local temp stuff and things like that.
Yeah, temp stuff and the software you're going to install and stuff. So, and that is a ridiculous machine.
So what you're trying to say is it's pretty much the same as my Nokia 1020.
Yes.
Yeah, not so much.
That's crazy.
That's kind of cool though, because it means you could end up rendering, really high quality 3D stuff and then just streaming the video to your low powered device. So.
Exactly. Yeah. So
I want to see Wolfenstein 3D done on that.
Oh, have you?
And
you ever taken
and sent to my phone?
Have you taken one of those old games and tried and run it on a current machine?
No.
Oh man, there used to be a game that fit on a 3.5 inch floppy. It still goes down as one of my favorite games of all time. It's called Command HQ. And it was just a full screen of the world, of the globe. And you basically did an Allied versus Axis war. So you did World War III.
Oh yeah.
And it was all real time. It wasn't turn based. The graphics were very rudimentary, but it was great strategy. You were trying to go acquire a bunch of oil, and then that could fuel your armies. The bigger your armies could get, the more oil you used. So you had to go take over a lot of oil fields, and if you nuke somebody, countries would flip sides because they don't want, nuclear stuff isn't really blowing the hell of a couple million people isn't generally seen as a good humanitarian effort.
Fair. Yeah.
So I went through and I plugged this in one time on a laptop years ago when I still had a 3.5 inch, and the problem was I couldn't play the game because the clock was so much faster than the 486 I used to play on, and the war was over within a few minutes. Which I think that's probably a little more real if we were using nukes. So
yeah, I was going to say I love those games that used to be unplayable when you got faster CPUs. I used to have, my favorite game of all time was a game called Elite, which is actually being remade as we speak and comes out next year. Hopefully, I backed it on Kickstarter. But that was the same. You know, there were a couple of those where you'd stick it on a faster PC and the thing would be unplayable because you'd be zooming around all over the place. So imagine it on a G2 extra large in AWS. It'd be like the war would be over in a split second.
It's kind of like the end scene from an Ender's Game.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So what else?
So the last thing I touch on that they added, and this one I'm gonna kind of read a little bit straight from their site here or their announcement with this, but this is a big deal for identity stuff. So they added SAML 2.0 support for identity federation. So over the years, what they've done is Amazon has shown, and I guess I shouldn't say shown, but what they've done is they've allowed you to use a different identity kind of federation to provide things like single sign-on to the management console. But a lot of things where they always fell down and where they didn't really have the ability to do it is to have SAML-based identity federation. And so
what's SAML?
Say again?
What's SAML?
SAML. Oh, sorry. Security Assertion Markup Language. It's a common way of of identity management and stuff that you're doing, or identity federation.
Gotcha. And so ADFS does this, right?
Yes, ADFS does this. And
Active Directory Federation Services? Is that
that's right. Yep.
Yeah.
And so this was something that Amazon didn't support in AWS. But now they announced at Ignite that they do support it now. They do support it as it's an industry standard. It's used by a lot of different identity providers like ADFS. It's going to enable federated SSO, giving users the ability to sign in to the AWS Management Console or make programmatic calls through the AWS APIs using different assertions from a SAML-compliant identity provider.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So
what this is going to let you do, right, is so Office 365 supports this as well, and there's a bunch of services that support this sort of identity federation. And it means that if you have ADFS on-prem hooked up to your Active Directory, it means that you can sign into multiple different systems. And those systems, when you go to authenticate with them, hand you off to ADFS to go and authenticate. So when I go and log into my company's 365 site, 365 goes, cool, you need to go and authenticate with your corporate identity provider, and so it sends me off to that. I key in my details, and then it sends me back to 365, and along with it passes like a SAML token with a series of claims associated with it, and those claims are things like this is Chris Johnson, this is his email address, these are his security groups if that's what you ask for, and so this is kind of cool for AWS, right? Because it means that you can hook it up to your same identity provider as you use for all these other systems and authenticate with AWS the same way.
Yeah, it's huge because you're really doing true SSO, true single sign-on, which is what we're all trying to we're all trying to get to. So ADFS is the way.
One identity to rule them all. I think that's the thing we want to get to, right? So you just have to only remember your corporate username and password.
Which also presents a lot of security challenges. If you hack that one account, you get access to so much stuff, and it's great until they come out with something else. They say, oh, no, that was a failed way of doing it. We have a brand new way of doing this stuff instead.
Yeah, nice.
So that's everything I got for the AWS side. Ignite had Invent had a ton of stuff that they announced, as you can see. This was some of the highlight stuff that I wanted to call out. So I definitely would, definitely some cool stuff that they've been doing to pay attention to. So
yeah, they're constantly making advances, right? Which is awesome for us.
Yeah. So what about from the Azure side? We've seen a lot of news coming on the Azure side. You've got that you were going to cover a little bit here for us in this episode.
Yeah, these guys have been, again, speaking of constant improvements, there's again more Azure news. They seem to continually be coming out with new features and new things. So again, just to sort of rattle off a few things that have been recent news. Windows Azure Traffic Manager is probably, for me at least, the most interesting. And what this guy allows you to do is more easily set up high availability for your things in Azure. So, for example, you could have an application running in Azure, and what Traffic Manager lets you do is set up instances of your app in, say, the West Coast, and then, say, in Europe, and make sure that when one of those goes down, if it goes down due to like maybe a DNS problem or something like that.
It doesn't happen.
Or maybe
DNS never goes down.
A SSL cert problem. Yeah, it doesn't. Maybe something like that.
Doesn't happen.
If one of those data centers go off the radar, then Traffic Manager can be used to load balance the traffic over to the other one. The other interesting usage for this is, say you've got users around the globe, then you can use Traffic Manager to direct users to the instance of your application that's closest to them to give you the most sort of responsive and snappy experience. And that's really fascinating because that means it's easy enough to set up instances in multiple data centers with Azure, real straightforward. And we could, then you could use that to serve European customers from the European data center, customers in Asia from the Asian data center, and then obviously within the States do the same, but also at the same time use it for failover and availability.
So it's kind of almost like a logic. You can think of it as like a logic-based network load balancer in a sense, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's constantly watching to make sure, is that guy still up, and if it's not, then fail traffic over to the other instance. And it lets you have a little bit of control about how that works. So if, say if your European instance is going totally spaz, people are hitting it left, right, and center, and the perf is really slow, you can also balance traffic based on its responsiveness. If it disappears off the face of the earth, you can obviously fail stuff over. Or you can just do a round robin between different instances. So you could say, your request might go to Europe, then mine might go to the East Coast of the States, then yours might go to the West Coast of the States, and just sort of round robin stuff to help load balance things. And it will depend on what your app's doing, depending on which one of those is the most appropriate. But, I could definitely see failover and performance being a big one.
So I guess I've seen some hardware solutions that do this as well, where you've got to have the device sitting on both sides, like an F5.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know if Amazon has anything like this in their cloud offering? I haven't seen anything like this on their side.
No, I'm not sure. I know that there've been a few instances of things like Netflix going down, which runs on the Amazon stack, where, say, a data center has been hit by lightning, for example, and the data center's gone offline, and Netflix was hosted there. It was a while ago now, but it was quite a famous case of this, and they didn't have the sort of system set up where there was sort of hot redundancy or failover to another data center, and people were like, well, what's the point of the cloud if you can't do that? And you can do it on Amazon. As I understand it, you can definitely do this sort of stuff on Amazon, but a lot of it is you have to set up yourself. Whereas I believe Traffic Manager is just a bit easier to set up, and Microsoft have done a bit of the hard work for us. Maybe somebody who's more familiar with the Amazon stack can send us a note and an audio recording and give us the skinny on exactly how that works on the AWS stack.
That's cool. That's a nice service offering to have in the cloud that you don't have to manage and go buy an expensive piece of hardware to go stand up.
Yeah, I mean, on-prem, people do this with some really expensive kit. And often they just switch on like sticky sessions anyway, and you're only using 2% of its features. But anyway. So the other one is Notification Hub, or Hubs. And this guy gives you the ability to do cross-platform push notifications to like things like Windows 8 or Windows Phone or iOS, that sort of stuff. So if I want to, as an application, if I want to send a push notification to one of those devices, then notification hubs help me with that. And this would be really helpful when I built My Trips. So I have a push notification service in My Trips to update your live tile on the Windows Phone. And I had to write all of that code to do that, and it was a little bit painful, tricky to get right. So the Notification Hub would have definitely helped with that. And the best thing about the Notification Hub is because it deals with cross-platform, so it does Windows Store, Windows Phone, iOS, and Android platforms. You can write your application code once, and it doesn't really matter the device that you're sending it to. The Notification Hub will deal with getting it out to that device.
I'd imagine that would be a very, very useful to, instead of having to go through and have that all incorporated into your app.
Yeah, no, definitely. A couple of other things real quickly. Biztalk Services is now available. People familiar with Biztalk, this has been a product that's had a long history at Microsoft. It's basically an orchestration service for being able to deal with different systems and managing integration of those different systems and so forth. So now you have the ability to stand that up in Azure, which could be quite interesting for folks. And then not so cloudy but vaguely related is the Windows Azure Pack. So this is a pack that delivers or gives you the ability to install on-prem and sort of manage your infrastructure internally in a similar way that you would with Azure in the cloud, with products like System Center and Windows Server 2012 R2 and so forth. So there's been a few of these kinds of things on-prem before with like Virtual Machine Manager and so forth. But the Windows Azure Pack kind of gives it the same sort of UI and self-service portal for people, make it a bunch easier to deal with virtual machines and so forth on premises.
Yeah, I see workflow, I see service bus, I see and websites as well. This is really slick.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And it sort of wraps it up like you look at it and it looks very similar to the same Azure portal as you see in the cloud.
That's cool.
And then the final note, although not an Azure improvement per se, just a quick shout out to Scott Hanselman's new, I think is a podcast. Is that the right word? It's a video blog, maybe. I don't know what you call this, but called Windows Azure Friday. And so there's a series of videos and so forth that Scott Hanselman's been putting together with various folks at Microsoft on all sorts of different topics. And so you can find that, we'll link to it in the show notes, but it's called Windows Azure Friday. And the tagline is Trusted Voices at the Center of the Enterprise and Cloud, at the center of Enterprise and Cloud Computing. So it's a series of interviews and talking about different topics and things. Looks like a pretty cool, easy to digest. They're generally not massively long, sort of 5-10 minute shows and on different topics, all about Azure.
Yeah, I've used this a little bit. Subscribed to it on. I first subscribed to it on my phone and found that he had so much good content in there, walking through different things that I gave up on using on my phone and actually subscribed to it on my tablet, so that the videos would come down. Because you can subscribe to the audio piece, you can subscribe to the video piece. There's some really good stuff in there. I'm a couple episodes back, but the one I believe he did one recently. I forget what the topic was, but all the ones he was showing about using Kudu for your deployments with Get straight to Windows Azure websites. It's really good stuff that it's almost like if you feel like you are coming into this, I'd love to have this for the Amazon side as well, but if you feel that you're coming into the cloud space a little late and you're kind of in this mode of, all right, how do I get going on this? I got all this great news of stuff that's coming out now, but how do I get up to speed on what's going on? This is a really good way to say, oh, let me take a step back and let me see all this different stuff that's there. And having him kind of walk you through some stuff. There's also a really good podcast that I'd like to throw in there as well, that I started listening to. It's just called the Azure Podcast. You can get it on iTunes. You get it on the Windows Store or the Microsoft Store as well. Where they are doing the exact same thing, where it's two MCS consultants out of the northeastern U.S., and they're talking about all these different capabilities and features inside of Azure, and they're going through them kind of one by one. So they don't have They're only on like episode number 7 right now. But it's really good because, I mean, you can see, they spend one time talking about the databases with SQL databases and then tables and queues and stuff. And then they talk about service bus and stuff. So, yeah.
And then one final sort of thing I'd mention around, it's Microsoft Cloud related, I guess, is Visual Studio Online. I can't remember if we mentioned this in the last show, but there was a big release recently. Visual Studio Online was formerly Team Foundation Service, which was kind of their online TFS. It was in preview before, I believe. But there are various plans. It's not a web-based version of Visual Studio, but it gives you all the stuff you need to get started. So it gives you source control in the cloud. It gives you bug and defect tracking in the cloud. There are plans that also give you a subscription-based version of Visual Studio, which I think is pretty cool. So for things like for roughly $22.50 per month per user, you can get all of the stuff in the cloud. So like all the things you'd get with TFS and all that sort of stuff. Plus, you'd also get Visual Studio Professional client application, right? So previously, if you had to go buy this outright, it was pretty expensive, or you got it through MSDN most of the time. But now this gives somebody an entry into all of the tools you need for development, including all your source control, everything for $22 a month, which is pretty cool.
They're really bringing this stuff, really lowering the bar. And provided you've got connectivity, you don't really need to show up with much hardware at all. You can just develop straight with a tablet, a nice lightweight tablet, and a nice connection, and then a small subscription to like Office 365 or to Azure or to Amazon. It's so cool seeing where we're going with all of this stuff, to really democratizing technology for everyone.
Definitely. It's making access to it a ton easier.
Yeah. I saw very cool Azure news that we got there.
Yeah, lots going on.
So what about, I saw there was a big announcement actually this past week from another fairly large technology company over on the west coast of the U.S. You want to touch on this one, how it relates to the cloud as well?
Yeah, a small North American software company.
Just a small one, yeah.
So Google came out and announced the Google Compute Engine, or the GCE, which is effectively the competition for virtual machines or infrastructure as a service in Azure and in Amazon. So it's been in preview for a little while, as I understand it. I didn't look at it while it was in preview, but they recently come out and announced that it's now generally available, and gives you the ability to go run virtual machines on Google's infrastructure. At the moment, it doesn't offer Windows VMs, so it's only Linux VMs, but I expect that to change fairly quickly, obviously. So at the moment, you could do things like Debian and CentOS.
I think SUSE is also on there as well.
And run those guys. Right. Yeah, possibly. Run it on Google's infrastructure. And obviously, these guys know how to do infrastructure. They've got some fairly beefy infrastructure around the world. And so it's interesting to see them going into this space. They've had the Google App Engine for a while, which is kind of the pseudo equivalent to PaaS, where you write your app and then run it in their environment. But with the advances into IaaS, or infrastructure as a service, you get full control of the VM and run that stuff. And this, I believe, is a direct move in competition with Amazon and Microsoft.
I do too. Yeah, it's funny because you see each one of these different companies. I get, you got to put the three real cloud companies are Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, in terms of being able to offer IaaS and PaaS and those services to customers. They all seem to really have their strong suits and the different offerings that are available to each other. I mean, it definitely seems like the general consensus that Amazon is the leader here. Microsoft is working very hard. I wouldn't say so much to catch up, but really to have an offering of their own. Because there's a lot of places where I think that they are very different from what we would do inside of Amazon. And Google it's surprising to me, but Google's just late to the game on this. I mean, you can't count this company out. I mean, they're going to come roaring into it if they see this as a viable option. But, when you look at basically the news coming out of, or the rumors, I should say, coming out of Seattle with Amazon, that even though their AWS business is only going to constitute about a 15% or 10% of their revenue annually, and they see this as being the biggest area of growth for the company. So I see it for that. I see it in this area. Yeah. It's one of the shining areas of that Microsoft has, as well as their whole Azure and cloud space. So this place is just going to get more and more interesting over the next few months and years to come, I think.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see the approach that each different provider has taken. So, you say Google was late to the game with this. They are with the IaaS stuff, but they've had the Google App Engine stuff around for years. And it's really interesting, the approach that they've taken, because so Google came out with kind of the equivalent of PaaS first, right? Same as Microsoft. You uploaded your app and it ran it, and same with Google. Whereas Amazon came at it from the other tact, which was the IaaS angle, and you got VMs and you hooked them up and you did different things in them. And I honestly believe that Microsoft and Google got it right to start with PaaS, but it was just too early. So I don't think the world was quite ready for just PaaS straight out of the gate, and I feel like they needed infrastructure as a service in the cloud, infrastructure as a service, VMs in the cloud, as a stepping stone to the cloud, whereas they feel more comfortable taking what they traditionally did on premises, moving it to the cloud and running it. They get full control over the VMs, and eventually I believe the way the cloud is going to go is just platform as a service. I don't think there'll be IaaS at some point down the line, years from now probably. But Microsoft had to do a big U-turn on this as well, right? Where Ray Ozzie started the whole thing and was doing platform as a service, and that didn't work out quite as well as they'd hoped. And so they've now gone down the infrastructure as a service route, and now Google are doing the same thing. And so I think it's fair to say that that illustrates that customers are far more comfortable with doing their VM stuff in the cloud than are with rebuilding apps as just ready for platform as a service.
I agree. I think,
but eventually, I think we're just going to get to run your app in the cloud and consume a bunch of cloud services. I don't think we'll see VMs and networking stuff eventually. Maybe 10 years from now.
I completely agree. I mean, it's everything you just said. I couldn't say I agree more, because it just. You have a completely different way of thinking to create these cloud-based applications if you're doing things more as like a PaaS-based offering, right? Because you're building something that's gonna run in a different way. Whereas the majority of the people that have been out there, except for the kids that are in college that are coming out now, the majority of the kids out there have all been focusing on building things that are running within these physical domains of different servers. And so when you kind of break that mold and you can work more in kind of a cloud of saying everything is interconnected, it really is a much better solution now. So I agree. It's going to take some time to get there. It's nice to have this stopgap, and behind the scenes, you can see these companies like Microsoft and Amazon and Google, they're going to end up using IaaS to support the PaaS offerings probably going forward. So, but it's ultimately, this stuff's probably going to become completely transparent to us, or at least that's where we're going to want to go. So,
yeah, no, I
cool
agree.
Stuff.
So some stuff they talk about on their webpage, and again, cloud.google.com, and you can find Compute Engine under the products there. They talk about high performance virtual machines. So they've got a whole bunch of range of different SKUs and number of cores and memory and all that sort of stuff. It runs on the Google platform, obviously, their network and all that sort of stuff. You pay for a minimum of 10 minutes, and then after that it's billed per minute. So that's kind of nice. They do some load balancing stuff. So that's, again, back to that traffic manager conversation we just had. They've also got a nice RESTful API, apparently. So I'll be looking at that. So that'll make it easy to talk to those
I wonder
things.
why we want to talk to those, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Dun dun dun! Don't give away the game, AC. And then finally, they talk about security. So they've got a bunch of ISO standards and all that sort of stuff that they say they comply to, which is a very interesting topic because I wonder, everybody's concerned about Google's data privacy and all that sort of stuff. I wonder how that applies to VMs in the cloud, and I wonder. I'm sorry if I'm going to use a really nasty term here, but I wonder if they're going to sniff your bits in the cloud and virtual machines as well.
It's a common concern you see people have. I mean, even I'm going to refer to that 60 Minutes interview that Jeff Bezos had, where at AWS Invent. So let me back up really quick. A couple months ago, the CIA and the Central Intelligence Agency in the United States was looking for a big cloud implementation, and they were going and putting a bunch of things out there for companies to bid on. And I believe it was IBM and Amazon were both competing for the business. Amazon ultimately won it, and then there was a lawsuit, and they had to open it back up to make sure everything was fair. But Amazon won it overall. I found it really interesting. There was a bit of concern about the CIA says we don't want to be in a public cloud. And all of these companies have really fought for a long time in saying there is no such thing as a private cloud. We all do public cloud, and that's all there is. And it's been different messaging and that kind of stuff around it. They've been saying, here's how you can do your own private cloud, but we're not doing it for you. Those kinds of things. Everyone always has the question. Customers always have these questions at the different conferences. And then at AWS Invent, they went out of their way to make sure to make people understood that no, we are not doing a private cloud for the CIA. And then you turn right around in the 60 Minutes interview that Jeff Bezos did, and on the eve of Black Friday, and he explicitly called what we're doing is a private cloud. So you see, people are very interested in this whole private cloud thing, and you see that that was the first time I think I've ever seen this whole cloud discussion to where one of the big cloud providers flat out said, yes, we're doing a private cloud for this customer. Whereas you've seen all these other third-party people either standing up their own smaller clouds for specific customers, but not using the clouds that everyone it really is kind of shopping for from Amazon or from Microsoft. And I guess now you'll see from Google. So
yeah, they're all competing for government business, right? So I know Microsoft is doing a lot in the federal cloud space and providing sort of private versions of various cloud services for government use, just to satisfy those requirements.
Yep. Cool stuff.
Yeah, so they've also got some pretty decent pricing on this Google VM stuff too. Although it doesn't do Windows yet, and I suspect those prices will be higher because they've got a license. You've got to pay licensing to Microsoft and stuff. If you go up there, you can see the machine pricing, but just to give you like a couple of examples, 1 core, 3.75 gig of RAM is about 10 cents an hour. And in Azure, you do get 2 cores for 3.5 gig of RAM with 3.5 gig of RAM, but it's about 18 cents an hour. And so there's a little bit of difference, between what things cost. A better one is in Azure, 4 cores, 7 gig of RAM, 36 cents an hour. Google, 20 cents an hour, 7.5 gig of RAM, but only 2 virtual cores. So, it depends on exactly what your compute needs are, but they're looking like they're going to stack up a little lower price right now. But that's probably because of them being all Linux distros and not Windows. And I suspect the Windows prices, much like Amazon, will be higher.
I would agree. I'd agree the same way there. It'll be interesting.
So I guess we'll stay tuned for that.
I'm sure we'll see that stuff change over time too, but it's always nice. I love competition, and it's nice to see a third player in this space with such a big backing. So we've covered a lot of news in this episode. We went a lot longer, I guess, than we normally go, but hopefully everybody got a pretty good overview of what's going on in the cloud world today between Amazon, Windows, Microsoft, and Google. So.
Yeah, and a quick apology for not putting out an episode last week. it was Thanksgiving here in the States, and so we're all stuffing our gobs with turkey and watching football and sitting on the couch.
I'm not going to apologize for that one. It was great football weekend. It was great food. It is my favorite holiday of the year because there's so much good food. So I run to eat and drink. My second most favorite holiday of the year is coming up with Christmas because it is the exact same thing. We eat, we drink, and we watch football.
I'm definitely acclimatizing to this American lifestyle.
We have this very cool thing called capitalism. It works great. If you have a question for us, go to microsoftcloudshow.com/questions, where you can submit it as text or record it as a WAV or an MP3 and provide a link so that we can play your question on the show. Our theme music is an excerpt from Evaporated Eric by Monk Turner, used under a Creative Commons license. You can subscribe to us in iTunes by searching for Microsoft Cloud Show or via RSS at microsoftcloudshow.com, where you will also find a full transcript and show notes of each episode. You can also find us on Facebook, searching for Microsoft Cloud Show, or on Twitter at MS Cloud Show. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.